Imagine you're Adolf Hitler in 1943. You know the Allies are preparing a massive invasion of southern Europe, but you don't know where. Your generals warn that Sicily is the obvious target. It is the obvious place, one of them says, so they will never go there. Now picture this. A single corpse washing up on a Spanish beach, carrying a battered briefcase chained to his wrist. Inside are top-secret Allied documents describing invasion plans that say Greece and Sardinia will be attacked, not Sicily. The documents look authentic. The story surrounding this dead officer seems airtight, and German intelligence believes every word. This wasn't luck. It was one of the most daring deception operations in modern history, Operation Mincemeat. In the next 15 minutes, we're unpacking the insane true story of how a fabricated life, a real dead body, and some forged papers helped fool Hitler and changed the outcome of World War II.
To understand Operation Mincemeat, we have to drop into 1943, when the Allies are desperate to re-enter Europe. North Africa has been mostly secured, but now the question is, where to strike next? Sicily is the gateway to Italy, but it's also heavily defended, and surprise is everything. The British decide to attempt something audacious, trick the entire Nazi high command into believing the invasion will strike somewhere else. What follows is a blend of spycraft, creativity, and downright morbid ingenuity. We'll follow the story from the birth of the idea, through the search for a body, to the crafting of a completely fictional man whose life had to seem more real than reality itself. As we go, pay attention to how tiny details made or broke this plan, and if you enjoy deep dives into the strangest corners of history, consider subscribing and hitting the bell, so you don't miss how stories like this build to the final twist at the very end.
By 1943, the Allies knew they had to invade Europe through its soft underbelly, Italy. But first they needed a foothold, and Sicily was the logical choice. That obviousness was the problem. The German High Command also knew that any sensible strategist would pick Sicily. The Allies had a rule: never attack where the enemy is strongest and most prepared. So they needed to convince Hitler that Sicily was a decoy, and the real blow was coming elsewhere. This wasn't just about maps and troop movements. It was about getting inside the mind of one man, Hitler, and feeding his existing fears and biases. British intelligence had already experimented with deception, but this time the stakes were enormous. If the ruse failed, thousands of men storming Sicilian beaches would face fully reinforced German defenses. The question became, how do you plant a lie so convincing that your enemy will rearrange whole armies to prepare for something that's never going to happen? Enter an obscure British memo called the Trout Memo, written years earlier by Naval Intelligence Officer John Godfrey and his brilliant assistant, a young man named Ian Fleming. Yes, the future creator of James Bond. The memo compared deception to trout fishing. You throw out bait and see what the enemy bites. Among dozens of suggested ruses was a bizarre idea: plant fake documents on a corpse, let the enemy discover them, and watch them act on the misinformation. It sounded like something from a spy novel, because it basically was. Fast forward to 1943. Two men in British naval intelligence, Ewan Montagu and Charles Cholmondeley, revisited that concept. They realized that if they could find the right body and forge the right identity, they might persuade the Germans that Greece and Sardinia, not Sicily, were the real Allied targets. The plan would be codenamed Operation Mincemeat, a dark joke implying something messy, disposable, and not entirely appetizing. For Operation Mincemeat to work, the Allies needed a believable messenger, a dead officer whose body could float ashore near neutral but Nazi-friendly Spain, carrying supposedly secret plans. The big problem: how do you find a body that looks like it died in a plane crash at sea without obvious injuries that would expose the ruse? Ewan Montagu quietly approached British pathologist Sir Bernard Spilsbury and St. Pancras Hospital. Eventually, they found a suitable candidate: Glyndwr Michael, a homeless Welshman who had died after ingesting rat poison. With no close family to claim him and a cause of death that could plausibly pass as drowning after an accident, his body, tragically,
became a weapon. This raises uncomfortable ethical questions. Montague and his team were acutely aware they were using a real human being for a deception. They arranged for Michael, who would be renamed, to be buried with honor later, even as they transformed him into the centerpiece of one of history's strangest operations.
With a body secured, the next step was to create an entirely new person, someone so richly detailed that no German intelligence officer would suspect fabrication. They named him Major William Martin of the Royal Marines, choosing a rank and service that would fit the cover story and existing Navy lists. From there, they built a complete life: identity cards, theater ticket stubs, a bill from a tailor, even an overdue bank notice. Every scrap in his pockets needed to tell a consistent human story. The crown jewel was his love life, a fictional fiancée named Pam. Agents created personal letters from Pam, including one that teasingly scolded him, another expressing affection. They even tracked the wear on his clothing and the stains in his pockets to match a real man's habits. This was more than paperwork. It was character development, written for an audience of skeptical enemies. Operation Mincemeat would succeed only if Major Martin felt absolutely real.
At the heart of the deception were the so-called top-secret documents Major Martin would carry. They had to be important enough for the Germans to care about, but not so perfectly convenient that they looked fake. British planners forged a personal letter between Lieutenant General Sir Archibald Nye and General Harold Alexander, casually discussing Allied plans to invade Greece and Sardinia, while downplaying Sicily as merely a feint. The tone was crucial, informal, slightly gossipy, full of realistic military shorthand. They added references to minor real operations and personalities to anchor the letter in genuine context. A second document mentioned aircraft reinforcements heading toward the eastern Mediterranean, consistent with a Greek invasion narrative. To make it riskier and more convincing, they included details that would be disastrous if true. That boldness was the point. A perfect lie, they knew, had to carry real potential damage, or the Germans wouldn't take the bait seriously enough to act on it.
Now they needed to explain why Major Martin was flying over the sea with such sensitive papers. The cover story: a plane crash. Martin would allegedly have been a courier flying from Britain to Allied headquarters in North Africa when his aircraft went down. To sell this, they dressed the body in proper uniform, added a life jacket, and placed personal touches like keys and a photograph of Pam. Crucially, they had to simulate the effects of prolonged immersion in seawater without actually leaving the body to rot. Pathologists injected the lungs with fluid, timed the refrigeration, and sealed the forged documents in envelopes designed to let just enough water seep in to appear natural. Every stage had to match what a Spanish coroner, under German pressure, might find. The last piece was geography. The body needed to appear off the coast of Spain, where German intelligence had strong contacts, yet Britain could plausibly claim a tragic accident at sea. On the night of April 19, 1943, the submarine HMS Seraph slipped silently through the dark Mediterranean, carrying the prepared body of Major William Martin in a special canister. Only a handful of crew members knew the truth. Most believed they were disposing of a fallen airman with honors. Just off the coast of Huelva, Spain, a region known for sympathetic Spanish officials who quietly passed fines to the Germans, the crew surfaced. In a solemn, almost ritual act, they read prayers over the body, then gently released it into the sea, ensuring winds and currents would carry it shoreward. Attached to Martin's wrist was the all-important briefcase containing the forged documents. To any passing fisherman or Spanish patrol, this would look like the tragic end of a military courier, not the opening move of a grand deception. Afterward, HMS Seraph vanished back into the night, leaving the fate of the entire operation to the tides and to human psychology. Within hours, Spanish fishermen discovered the floating body and alerted local authorities. The plan's second phase began, not in London, but in the offices of Spanish officials and German agents. Spain was officially neutral, but many in its government sympathized with the Axis. German intelligence officers in Madrid had long relied on Spanish contacts to quietly pass along sensitive finds. British codebreakers quickly intercepted signals indicating that important documents had been recovered from a dead British officer. London's response was almost theatrical. The British ambassador in Madrid demanded the documents back with frantic urgency, sending multiple notes that alternated between politeness and panic. This was deliberate overacting. They needed the Germans to believe these papers were genuine and devastating if compromised. Meanwhile, the Spanish stalled, secretly allowing German agents access to photograph the contents. The more Britain appeared desperate to recover them, the more Berlin would be convinced they had stumbled onto priceless intelligence. The crucial question was, would the Germans swallow the bait? In Berlin, intelligence officers pored over the copied documents, hunting for inconsistencies. They examined signatures, water damage, even the fold patterns of the letters. German agents in Spain reported that the British seemed almost hysterical about getting the briefcase back. One officer noted that London's behavior was too emotional to be staged, ironically, exactly what the British intended. Adolf Hitler, increasingly paranoid and distrustful, yet still convinced of his own strategic genius, fixated on the idea that Sicily was too obvious a target. The forged documents confirmed his bias. High command reports show him repeatedly citing the supposed Allied plans for Greece. Skeptics within German intelligence raised small doubts, but they were overruled. Confirmation bias did the rest. The more the documents aligned with Hitler's expectations, the more real they became in his mind, and the more troops and defenses he shifted away from Sicily. Operation Mincemeat's success can be measured in numbers and deployments. German forces significantly reinforced Greece and Sardinia, moving units, aircraft, and coastal defenses away from Sicily. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel was ordered to inspect Greek defenses, a clear sign of how seriously Berlin took the supposed threat. Intelligence intercepts later showed German confidence that Sicily was merely a diversion. Hitler called it a smokescreen, convinced that the real blow would fall in the eastern Mediterranean. On July 10, 1943, Allied forces launched Operation Husky, the actual invasion of Sicily. Resistance was still fierce, but it was far weaker than it might have been. German and Italian troops were spread thinner, their attention divided. Allied commanders later reported that the landing met less organized opposition than feared. While many factors shaped the campaign's outcome, Operation Mincemeat had unquestionably tilted the scales, buying Allied soldiers on those beaches something priceless, reduced enemy readiness and confusion. In the years after the war, the true story behind Operation Mincemeat slowly emerged. Official secrecy, misdirection, and even deliberate myth-making obscured the details for decades. Early public accounts spoke of the man who never was, based on a best-selling book and film that dramatized the operation, but altered key facts. For a long time, the identity of the real man used in the deception was unknown or misattributed. Only later did evidence confirm that Glyndwr Michael, the homeless Welshman, had been transformed into Major William Martin. In Huelva, Spain, his grave long bore the name William Martin, Royal Marines. Eventually, an additional inscription acknowledged Glyndwr Michael served as Major William Martin. It's a haunting reminder that behind elaborate operations and code names are real human lives, often marginalized or forgotten. Modern historians, using declassified files, have since reconstructed the operation in remarkable detail, revealing how truth, fiction, and propaganda intertwined. Operation Mincemeat offers more than just a quirky wartime anecdote. It's a masterclass in how deception really works. First, it shows that effective lies rarely stand alone. They're woven into existing beliefs and fears, in this case, Hitler's suspicion that the obvious target couldn't be the real one. Second, the operation's success hinged on obsessive attention to detail. Ticket stubs, love letters, water stains, even bank notices. The British didn't just forge documents, they forged a life. Third, It highlights the moral gray zones of total war. Using Glyndwr Michael's body was both strategically brilliant and ethically unsettling, forcing us to consider what's acceptable in the pursuit of victory. Finally, Mincemeat reminds us that information, true or false, can move armies. Today, in an age of cyber warfare and disinformation, the same principles apply. The most dangerous lies are those that feel like they must be true because they fit the story we already want to believe. If this deep dive into Operation Mincemeat challenged how you think about war, truth, and storytelling, don't let the journey end here. There are countless operations, successful and disastrous, that shaped World War II in ways most people never hear about. On this channel, we explore the hidden decisions and quiet moments that changed history far from the battlefield. If that's the kind of perspective you want more of, take a second to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you'll know when the next story drops. In the comments, tell me what struck you most about Mincemeat. Was it the creativity, the ethics, the psychology, or the fact that Hitler helped fool himself? And what operation or figure should we unpack next? Codebreakers at Bletchley Park, the double-cross system, or the deadly deceptions around D-Day? Thanks for watching to the end. Your curiosity and your skepticism are exactly what keeps stories like this alive.